Welcome back to the channel. It's another 2K report. I'm using Harleys again, and this time I'm facing off against a mixed guard list. First things first, let's take a look at the army rosters. A quick note about the Guard Army list. As you've seen, the main battalion is actually mixed, and comprises of Krieg, Tallarn, and Kadashan. Yeah, I can't pronounce that one correctly, sorry. It means they miss out on their regimental doctrines, but they can still benefit from other regiment-specific stuff, such as Harker's re-rolls for the Manticores, or the Tallarn tank order to move after shooting. Pretty cool.
It's treason, then.
So we're playing Battle Lines, a mission from Chapter Approved 2020. It's basically the same as Frontline Warfare except the deployment is hammer and anvil style. We're also using the minimum size board for a 2K game. In terms of secondaries, mine are the same as the previous match, namely, engage on all fronts, vital ground, and bring it down, whereas Guard take deploy scramblers, while we stand we fight, and line breaker. Here's deployment. Our home objectives are behind the ziggurat-style buildings. Thanks to the plethora of terrain, I'm able to keep all my Star Weavers out of sight. My bikes are weighted towards the bottom of the table, aka my left flank, as this way they're opposite the Manticores, which I think are the biggest threat. Here's Guard. The Manticores are here, 2 tank commanders in the center, and the 3rd tank commander is over here. He has 1 infantry unit, and all his Death Riders, in reserve. That's 4 command squads and 4 units of 4 Death Riders.
That's all normal and good.
Meanwhile, in reserve I just have the Incarn. Right, so I get the first turn. Let's get into the battle. In movement, I swamped the central bottom objective with bikes. For clarity, here's how the units are divided up. The unit of 5 at the bottom gets prismatic blurred. The little unit of 2 is scoring me engage on all fronts. I keep my Void Weaver back to hold my home objective, and my fusion boats just move up but ensure they stay out of sight behind obscuring terrain. Finally, my Death Jester's ride, with an Embrace troop and 1 fusion pistol inside, takes the topmost central objective. I just wanted him to have to deal with this extra annoyance to stop me scoring big on vital ground and primaries next turn, but I don't think it was a very good move, as it won't be hard for him to dislodge it. In Psychic, I try a cheeky Mirror of Minds to no avail, but I do manage to Twilight Pathways the other 5 bikes, so both units have a 3++. I stuffed up the placement of my Shadow Seer and the spread of my bikes, because Twilight Pathways has such a short range that he could only cast it on the unit of bikes which were holding the objective, meaning I couldn't fling them into the Manticores.
So, crap.
So in shooting, the bottom unit of 5 bikes can actually all see one of the Manticores, due to their angle and the length of its body. About 5 or 6 of my other bikes can draw a bead on one of the tank commanders. Now, the Manticores are frickin' terrifying, as both of them do flat 3 damage with their missiles, thanks to full payloads. The Russes are quite scary too, and in addition they're the most expensive units in his army, meaning each one I kill will deny him 5 victory points. Let's hope for some good rolls, eh? Nope. This is also the after picture. I leave the Manticore with 1 wound remaining.
Oh, look at this little bastard.
And the Russ with 6 or 7.
No good?
No good.
Elsewhere, I think the Death Jester and his boat just kill a couple of infantry. So I'm going to try and show the running total of points from now on, it's just easier to follow. I get 2 from engage on all fronts, which together with the 10, automatic bonus points, puts me on 12. Guards send their Krieg infantry forwards. These ones over here, I believe, are combat engineers. They have perfect weapons for unloading against my bikes, with 2 shots each, Wounding on 2+ against non-vehicles, 0 AP, and 2 damage.
What?
The manticores obviously don't need to move as they don't need line of sight. In the corner, both these Russes just move to peek out slightly, and the infantry here come forward too. In shooting, the Russes use the Talarn tank command to move after shooting, and the infantry over here get moved up to the objective. Then, he obviously needs to inflict massive damage to my bikes to stop me from wreaking havoc to his vehicles next turn, so they come under a lot of fire, but the 3++ on the big units comes good, and I only lose one bike from the bottom unit.
I went, whew, I made it.
He does succeed in killing the unit of 2, however, which only had a 4++. Over here, the Death Jester's right gets obliterated, but everyone jumps out unharmed. Finally, he makes a bold charge with one infantry squad into my bikes which are holding the objective. With his pile-in, he's able to grab the objective. I lose no bikes and kill a handful of guys in return, but he's done what he needs to stop me scoring from either of the central objectives. So Guard don't get any points yet. On to Harley's turn 2. Okay, so I gotta take out these tanks, in case I don't get so lucky next turn. In the bottom left, I send 4 bikes after the manticores, while the rest go after the central tank commanders, along with a fusion boat. Over by the bottom central objective, I disembark a troop to dislodge the infantry squad, along with my Shadow Seer. By the top objective, I send a couple of boats to harass the enemy, and my warlord disembarks in order to muller the infantry squad here, as I want my players to go after some combat engineers, who are just out of sight. Here's a close-up of my nasty old troop master squaring up to the squad.
You and your friends are dead!
Oh, and my Void Weaver still hangs back on my home objective, while my Death Jester starts to retreat towards it to hopefully provide some redundancy in a later turn. Psychic's uneventful. In shooting, I finish off one Manticore and put a bit of hurt onto the second. My fusion boat here finishes off the closest Russ, and this leaves my remaining Skyweavers free to target the other central tank commander. They roll hot, and destroy it.
We're all so happy. Jim came running down the hill.
I'll quickly run through my combats, as they're all pretty much foregone conclusions. My Warlord and Starweaver charge this unit and destroy them, and the players charge some engineers who are behind the ruin here, and kill most but not all of them. This unit obviously gets completely mullered by my cackling clowns too. The Skyweavers over here charge and kill the character dude guy who's hanging out on his home objective, and the other Skyweavers tag the remaining Manticore in combat, but fail to wound it. Everything goes great, then, except there's one guy left in a unit over here, who makes 3 feel no pain saves to survive a barrage from this Starweaver. I charge the Starweaver in, but still fail to kill him.
He is a bastard.
So as Guard shoved me off the central objectives last turn, I only scored 5 points for primaries at the start of the turn, and none for vital ground. I do however score a massive 9 points for Bring It Down, as each tank was worth 3 points, and 3 more for Engage, so it's looking pretty good at the moment, although Guard are banking on cashing in points at the end of the game. Killing both central tank commanders this turn was pretty big, as it denies him 10 victory points from While We Stand We Fight. My opponent did quickly realize it would have been much better to keep the tank commanders in reserve instead of the Death Riders, to have a better chance of preserving those 15 points. In Guard turn 2, his remaining infantry advance to menace my exposed troop and Shadow Seer, and he brings in all his Death Riders and Death Rider command squads. Some come down here. A bunch more come in this corner. And in the bottom corner in my deployment zone, some more cavalry and a unit of infantry. Not sure what the infantry are, to be honest. The Death Riders can come in on my board edge cause they're not using the normal reserve rules, they have their own funky ones. The lone surviving infantry squad member, who made all his feel no pains last turn, scuttles over to contest the home objective, annoyingly. Well, in shooting, I don't think the last tank commander achieves much, but over here, the troop squad gets annihilated. He then tries a few big charges with the Death Riders, but only makes one of them, against my Warlord, who survives the initial flurry of lance attacks with 1 wound remaining, but is then kicked to death by the horses before he can strike back.
That was very disappointing.
The infantry over here charge my Shadow Seer and take a few clumsy swipes, but he survives. So here's the scorecard at the end of round 2. Guard actually got nothing for primaries, but do start putting some points on the board with an easy 4 from Linebreaker thanks to their reserves coming in. It's not looking good for Guard, but perhaps the sheer number of cavalry now on the table can start to turn the tide. My turn 3. I moved to consolidate my position in the enemy deployment zone. In the top left corner, I sent some bikes and a fusion bow to take care of the last tank commander, who you can't quite see, and I moved my other remaining bikes so they can see the Manticore in the bottom left corner, but then can charge and finish off all the stragglers near his home objective afterwards. Apart from my Death Jester and Void Weaver, I've abandoned my own side of the board for now, so we've essentially switched able ends. The tank commander is destroyed with ease. And over here, after a decent bit of psychic and shooting, just 2 guys remain to challenge my Shadow Seer. I also finish off the Manticore and the remaining infantry as planned, so now I'm well and truly ensconced on the enemy home objective.
I'm standing on it, it's my land.
Finally, after a scuffle here, I kill no one and take 2 wounds? And the players here kill 1 and lose 1. Only 5 more for primaries again, but finishing off all his tanks maxes out my bring it down score, and I get 2 more for engage on all fronts. The Death Korps cavalry begin their aggressive maneuvers, in an attempt to wrest control of the battlefield from me. Several head for the Shadow Seer, backed up by some infantry who come out of the woodwork. We see a large influx up here, too, with multiple units threatening my home objective. Down here is a unit of infantry which he now brings in from reserve and is able to complete deploy scramblers with, which earns him 15 victory points, as he'd obviously completed the other actions in his previous turns. All that happens in shooting as my Shadow Seer is cruelly gunned down by the infantry surrounding him. In combat, the cavalry up here finish off the last player and remain secure on the objective. And a massive cavalry charge my Void Weaver and completely muller it, taking my home objective. With the cavalry swarming around my objective, and the rest of my army miles away on the other side of the table, the death of the Void Weaver seems like the perfect opportunity to bring in the Incarn, to sort shit out.
I'm on your ass like stink on shit.
Oh, the only other thing to note is my Death Jester gets mullered by a few stray Death Riders, because I kept him close to a ledge, so they were able to attack him with the new 5-inch vertical coherency rule, which to be honest I just forgot about. Okay, so this is much more like it, and guards start to make a spirited comeback, trailing by just 4 points now, with 38. They score deploy scramblers, as I mentioned, and another easy line breaker, plus they finally got some primary points too. I know deploy scramblers is technically scored at the end, but it makes more sense to record it now, in my opinion. At the start of my turn 4, I'm just holding the enemy objective, so I score 5 for primaries. I leave a troop on there which scores me another 3 for vital ground. I start sending my Star Weavers back across the board to start picking off Death Riders, as the Incarn prepares to hopefully retake my home objective.
There's gonna be carnage.
The Death Riders over here are slain in combat from a combined charge, and I take this objective. And for the sake of tying up loose ends, I send a few bikes down to the bottom left corner and kill Harker. After killing a good number of cavalry with smite and some shuriken cannon fire, the Incarn's frenzied onslaught kills all but one of the remaining ones here. So as mentioned, I get 5 more for primaries and 3 for vital ground, but due to stupid errant positioning I managed to actually not score anything for engage on all fronts this turn. This was completely avoidable if I had just moved or consolidated slightly differently with the Incarn and the Star Weaver I charged in alongside him.
I take responsibility always for everything because it's ultimately my job too.
Anyway, my total goes up to 50. Guard turn 4. On the right, he sends a few more cavalry in to try and deal with the Incarn. In the center, he holds the bottom objective with infantry and crowds under one of my Star Weavers with cavalry, as they can poke at it from underneath. At the top, some more cavalry head across to try and retake this objective again.
Would you consider just starting off?
Well, they don't manage to poke my perched boat to death, but up here the Death Riders do manage to wipe out my last remaining Sky Weavers with a charge, and successfully retake the objective. Over here, however, the pile-on isn't quite so successful. The Incarn does take 2 or 3 wounds, but in return he slaughters the Death Riders to a man. The only change on the scoresheet for guard this turn, then, is 5 more for primaries, for the bottom objective. The Incarn robbed them of their chance to score any more points from behind enemy lines. In my turn 5, I just disembark some remaining players and delete the Death Riders from this objective. I then just make sure to grab another 3 from engage on all fronts, and that's really all there is to say about this turn. I scored 10 from primaries, for holding both my own and the enemy's objective, 3 from vital ground, and 3 for engage. This puts my final score up to 66. Guard have very little left and are consequently unable to score anything other than 5 more points for primaries. Let's go to the final score sheet, as I have a slight amendment to make. So I've added on guards 5 for primaries, but unfortunately I've just noticed that you only score 10 for completing deploy scramblers, so I've amended this on the sheet now, making their final total 43, still. So the game ends with a 66-43 Harlequin victory. It was an uphill struggle from the get-go for Guard, as it was apparent there was essentially no way he could stop me from denying him 15 victory points by taking out his tank commanders, and what's more, all his vehicles gave up 3 points each whenever I killed them, giving me a relatively easy maxed-out secondary. We agreed that if he'd stuck the tank commanders into reserve instead of the Death Riders, it might have been a lot more cagey, as he could then have brought them out once the haywire presence on the table had been adequately thinned out, so I was lucky in that respect. My extreme amount of anti-vehicle firepower, combined with an obscene amount of 3++, was just incredibly difficult for the Guard to deal with, too. I do love seeing Krieg on the field, though. The models are frickin' amazing, and they have a lot of very cool, unusual, and thematic rules. Well, that about does it. Thanks for checking out my report, and if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that shiz.